The tropical sun beats down on the South China Sea, but the waters are far from calm. A Philippine Coast Guard vessel sits on a routine resupply mission. Suddenly, a massive Chinese Coast Guard ship appears, cutting across its path. Horns blare, a tense standoff between two nations. This is daily reality in these contested waters. The Filipino captain's orders: do not escalate, but do not back down. The Chinese demand the Philippine vessel leave. The Filipinos calmly assert their rights under international law. The air is thick with unspoken threats. A single misstep could spark a crisis. This is a David and Goliath struggle. China, a superpower, versus smaller Southeast Asian nations defending their sovereignty. These standoffs are growing more frequent and aggressive, part of Beijing's gray zone tactics, intimidating but just short of war. For the sailors, it's a nerve-wracking test of will on the front lines of a geopolitical chess match. The stakes: fishing grounds, oil, gas, and the livelihoods of millions. These confrontations are the backdrop for a bold new strategic proposal. The world is watching, and the next move could change the region's future. The South China Sea is more than a flashpoint, it's a test of resolve. The question: how can smaller nations stand up to a giant? Why does the South China Sea matter so much? For ASEAN's 10 nations, it's a lifeline. Trillions in trade pass through these waters every year. For Vietnam, the Philippines, and Malaysia, these are not distant seas, they're home. Their economies and fishermen depend on free passage. Beneath the waves lie vast reserves of oil and gas, potential game changers for developing nations. Access to these resources is about security and prosperity. China's sweeping 9-line claim threatens to lock ASEAN out of its own future. For Beijing, it's about power, prestige, and controlling a strategic crossroads. Dominance here would let China project military power and challenge the US in the Pacific. The 2016 Hague Tribunal ruling invalidated most of China's claims, a legal win for the Philippines, ignored by Beijing. ASEAN faces a powerful neighbor determined to write its own rules. The heart of the problem: ASEAN nations fighting for sovereignty and growth. China pushing historic claims. The stakes are high, and the world is watching. Can ASEAN defend its rights, or will China's ambitions prevail? The answer will shape the region's future. Enter a bold new proposal: the Hegseth Doctrine. Pete Hegseth argues ASEAN's current approach, quiet diplomacy, has failed to halt China's advance. His strategy: unity is the only language China respects. As long as ASEAN acts alone, China divides and conquers. The Hegseth Doctrine calls for a united front. An attack on one is an attack on all. Not a call for war, but for strength, clear red lines, shared responses, and no more ambiguity. ASEAN must agree on what's unacceptable and how to respond, publicly and collectively. Power isn't just ships and missiles, it's economic leverage and partnerships. Hegseth urges ASEAN to strengthen ties with the US, Japan, Australia, and India. The goal: balance China, not contain it, ensuring no single nation dictates the region's future. It's a strategy for a new era. But can ASEAN unite? The group's strength, consensus, has become its weakness. 10 diverse nations from Indonesia to Vietnam must all agree before acting. China exploits this, using economic influence to keep some members, like Cambodia and Laos, from criticizing Beijing. Official statements are often watered down, rarely naming China or proposing action. Claimant states like the Philippines and Vietnam face daily threats. Landlocked Laos sees the dispute as distant. Diverging interests make unity difficult. ASEAN's tradition of non-interference prevents strong collective action. The choice: continue quiet diplomacy as China changes facts on the water, or try something new. The Hegseth Doctrine forces a tough conversation: modify old principles, or risk irrelevance. The path forward demands courage and compromise. Can ASEAN adapt before it's too late? The stakes: sovereignty, security, and the region's future. The time for indecision is over. Unity may be ASEAN's only hope. The Hegseth Doctrine's first step: build a shield of unity. ASEAN must move from vague statements to a formal unified position on the South China Sea, grounded in international law. A single voice transforms the dispute from bilateral squabbles to a stand for a rules-based order. ASEAN should set clear red lines. Harassment of any member triggers a collective response. Not military action, but coordinated diplomatic and economic consequences. The goal: make China think twice before acting aggressively. Joint maritime patrols, ships from Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines and Malaysia under one flag, would send a powerful message. Solidarity must extend to diplomacy. ASEAN leaders should speak for the bloc, not just their own countries. No more bilateral talks with China, only bloc-to-China negotiations. This upends China's divide-and-conquer strategy. The shield of unity is more than symbolism. It's a new reality. ASEAN's credibility depends on action, not just words. The world will be watching. The second pillar: economic power and partnerships. ASEAN is a massive market, over 650 million people and a booming economy. China is ASEAN's top trading partner, but the relationship is mutual. Hegseth urges ASEAN to use this leverage, reward cooperation, penalize aggression, delay projects if China harasses members, fast-track deals if it plays by the rules. It's carrot and stick, but as a bloc. Beyond internal strength, ASEAN must build smart partnerships with the US, Japan, Australia, India, and Europe. These aren't anti-China alliances, but coalitions for international law. More joint military exercises, intelligence sharing, and alternative investments to China's Belt and Road. The goal: resilience and options, not dependence on any single power. A dense web of cooperation makes ASEAN harder to coerce. Strategic autonomy is key. The region's future depends on smart, collective choices. A unified ASEAN would force China to rethink its strategy. No longer could Beijing intimidate or divide its neighbors. China would face a choice: escalate and risk backlash, or negotiate as a responsible stakeholder. A real binding code of conduct could finally emerge. For the US, a stronger ASEAN is a win. Less burden on Washington, more regional stability. America could support, not lead, letting Southeast Asia shape its own destiny. This new balance would make the region less vulnerable to shifts in US politics. ASEAN as a central pillar of stability benefits everyone. Freedom of navigation and commerce would be protected by those who depend on it most. The Indo-Pacific's future would be decided in Southeast Asia, not Washington or Beijing. The stakes are global. The Hegseth doctrine faces real obstacles. ASEAN's consensus culture makes radical change hard. China will pressure its closest partners to resist. Critics warn a united stance could provoke China, risking escalation. Some argue quiet diplomacy is safer, fearing collective defiance could backfire. Coordinating 10 nations' militaries and economies is a logistical challenge. ASEAN isn't NATO. Building trust and interoperability will take time and investment. There's also the risk of over-reliance on outside partners. ASEAN must lead, not become a pawn in US-China rivalry. The balance: accept help, but keep control. The path is tough, but the alternative is stagnation. Despite the challenges, the Hegseth doctrine offers hope, a clear path forward. It empowers Southeast Asia to shape its own destiny, not just watch great powers compete. The goal isn't to exclude China, but to balance its power with collective will. Imagine a South China Sea where all can sail and explore without fear. The journey will require courage, skill, and new thinking. ASEAN's leaders must convince their people that unity's risks are worth the rewards. The future will be decided in Southeast Asia's capitals. The Hegseth doctrine is a bold blueprint for sovereignty and peace. Calm waters are possible if ASEAN stands together. The promise of unity is a more secure future for all.